Yeah. I always like, so we're recording now just to let you know, but it is funny how saying that I have a clean rating on iTunes, sometimes I have had people say,
I better change my filter now.
Yeah, exactly. Or can we just, can I take a moment?
Yeah.
Take a moment. Let me get out my swear words, and then I'll tell you when I'm going to hit record, which is something entirely, a buddy and I, the other podcast that I do, we call it the on-ramp.
Okay.
And we often say we wish we could release the recordings from the on-ramp,
Yeah.
because that's where you sort of get your...
Some of the flavor. Now, just to give you a little heads up, I have a problem swearing in that it's very hard for me to. There was one time early on in university, I decided, you know what, I'm going to start swearing because I never really did. And I started swearing, and all my friends were looking at me.
Make it sound like a self-improvement program or something.
It kind of was. I thought, okay, I got to expand my vocabulary. And every friend I had looked at me and said, Eugene, stop. Because it just doesn't sound right coming out of your mouth. And I realized it just doesn't come out. So we won't have an issue with the clean rating for
I like that. Okay, so before we go too much further, so how about throw down this is Chasing Squirrels. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for finding the podcast again. Happy that you're here. Happy that I'm talking to Eugene Chun. But could you, in your words, not so sweary,
okay,
brand yourself. Who are you?
Who am I? I'm a tinkerer. I'm a educator. I'm a creator, a crafter. That's who I am. I've always been interested in merging multiple disciplines together. So first and foremost, currently I'm employed as a teacher in the high school setting for secondary school in the public sector. But I come from technical industry as my background, and I've always had artistic elements woven throughout my life. So that's who I am in a very short nutshell.
Yeah, so then you make me wonder about that whole rebranding thing you're talking about, trying to swear. I tried for a while to rebrand myself as Christopher. And I had a similar sort of response from people around me, like it just couldn't.
That?
Yeah, exactly. It just didn't work. So you trying on, some of the profanity, it sounds like we have a similar. That's good. So go. It sounds like you're.
No, it's just, with the name Eugene, being growing up in an education system with a nerdy name and also being good at math, being Asian, it just all the more filled the stereotypes. So I had to try to break all those stereotypes in school. When I was in high school, way back when, I was in part of the gifted program as well. And it's like, okay, again, accentuating the nerdiness of my name. But I did everything I could to stay away from that. Got involved with sports, did art, did not take any computer courses in high school, just to stay away from all the nerds that were, because I was just branded as that. And then so, again, part and parcel is just at one point I thought, everybody's swearing, let me try it. It didn't work. It was funny.
Like without dropping it, what was the one that you test drove?
Primarily sugar honey iced tea, right? Keeping you clean, right?
That is awesome. I've never see the version I know of that is So Happy It's Thursday.
So happy it's okay. That works too, right?
That is awesome. That is awesome.
And people just looked at me and said, "No,
stop.
Just doesn't work."
It's like using the dad language.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like using the dad language, and you're just like you can't be a dad and a hipster at the same time.
No.
Like it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Because the hope is that your kids call you out on that. So I'm going to push you. You started me thinking about your high school experience. So one of the spaces that I've started to kind of dig in these conversations are, if you can go back to, let's say, your earliest EDU experience.
Yeah.
So can you? You call out high school. Messing around there and avoiding your own stereotypes, so to speak.
Yeah.
Can you go back even further? What's your earliest educational memory?
That's an interesting one. It depends on which forum you're looking at. And I think the one thing that really captured my heart of learning and experiencing was probably art school. When I was a young kid, they sent me to an art class Saturday morning. And it's like, oh my gosh, I had so much more fun here.
They as in your parents?
My parents,
okay.
yes. And I had more fun here in the 2 hours that I spent drawing and doing stuff than I did in school all week. And I would look forward to that. But that was very short-lived. I continued doodling and drawing, and then eventually got into an art school and did a number of things there. And there's always this passion, a desire to do something, to make something, to create something. And there's more to it than that we'll go philosophical later, but a lot of it had to do with, I liked creating things that people could recognize. And so, that I would recognize, but also sharing it with people was the key thing. And then finding that if I learned how to do certain things, I could utilize many different elements and put them together. And that's where the crafting comes into play.
You got me thinking about maker culture. Like, you got me thinking about my own roots in that and how I noticed. Because it's one thing to do. If you always felt like it's just what you always did,
Yeah.
you know, you talking with your parents or your family friends, and they say, oh yeah, you know, like Eugene, even from an early age, was sort of like stacking blocks or taking apart a radio. That's actually me. I kind of using it. That was me, actually. My dad used to sort of relate stories about, you know, how many radios they had to buy
because they kept on being taken
because
apart.
I would take them apart. I was curious about, I was never really great about putting them back together again, but I was
Yeah.
infinitely curious about
How things
what the componentry. Yeah.
I hear you,
was
brother.
was it about how it worked? Now you got me thinking, was it about how it worked? I think there was something, maybe the best way to look at it is like, I think about the device that I'm recording our conversation on right now. And there's some quote out there that talks about any piece of technology that is not completely understood can seem magical.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the radio kind of represented. There was a magic to it that my brain craved.
To deconstruct.
Yeah, I was going to say deconstruct. Yeah. It craved to see what was the concrete bits behind the magic. It's funny because if I take that forward now to my mindset now, it's actually a little bit of a detrimental mindset because sometimes in the deconstruction, losing the magic, you don't realize that it's actually by addressing the magic too deeply. You lose the magic.
Yeah,
like it's no longer.
I think where you just look at all the deconstruction and just stop there. Like, I always took stuff apart, just like you. I took stuff apart, but I always looked at ways, how can I make this better? And everything I tried to take apart, I tried to make it better or smaller or faster or something to that degree. I overloaded so many electronic components with more voltage than it should have had. Remote control cars went a lot faster and whatnot, but it's just, I ruined a lot of electronics. I learned in the process, but at the same time, these were learning experiences that, wow, I wouldn't have gotten, I could have gotten in school, but those courses weren't available to me per se. My parents were very much, oh no, okay, we'll support you in the arts, but you know what, you got to study well and become someone of a business affluent and become, you need to make money, which is their big concern was, you got to be able to support yourself. And they really, even though they supported my artistic upbringing and my desire, they also downtrodden it in the sense that you're never going to make money as an artist. Or, you know, even I thought maybe I'll become an architect. Well, you'll never make money as an architect. And it's like, it's just their ill-conceived perception of what they saw as an architect or an artist. And so they really pushed me away from that. And that was a journey in itself.
What do you think was feeding into that kind of perception of stay away from the arts? My family was on the, let's say, on the opposite end of the spectrum. Do what you want, Clough. But in some ways, that was a type of lockdown thinking as well.
It's so far away, it's almost like the exact same
We're standing
extreme,
side by
right?
side, yeah,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
I'm looking for someone to kind of give me direction. And you're looking for someone to kind of say, just
Let me go.
let me be free. Yeah, and we're both kind of like, we're both landlocked on it.
Yeah.
My parents were very much, it's funny because when you started to talk about being able to sustain and live and support yourself, my family was more about you need life skills.
Yeah.
So, Clough, you need to be able to do taxes. You need to be able to go grocery shopping. You need to be able to drive a car. Like, no joke. No. And this is kind of like the back. So this was the lockdown thinking that you know, it was about being functional living skills that might not ever necessarily, like I would be the most functional unemployed person ever, right? I can do like no job skills, but I can live, right? I can cook, I can clean. Yeah. It's like the, you know, well, so I guess it's all good. It's all good fodder for being a dad. Let's be honest. I mean, those are necessary skills.
Absolutely.
And it was funny because when I made it into university, I met a lot of really smart people.
Yeah.
And I kept on thinking to myself, but the rooms smelled terrible. And I would watch them eat. I'm like, you're like an animal. Like, look at how you're holding your fork. It was sort of like, no joke. It was funny because I made it into university. So I went to university 1990. So that's when I went in. A lot of my friends were going to university. I didn't want to go to the university that all my friends were going to. They were all going to Brock.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I don't want to do it like them. I was kind of starting to shift away from the center of my group. And I thought to myself, I still want to go, I think, because everyone was going.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons that I wanted to go is because I had success in life. I had a job. I was already working in hospitality. I had made money, cut a deal with my parents, pay 50, they pay 50.
Yeah.
So it was like closing the contract, right? I'm going to prove that I can live. I've already established I was like a jobber. I was already working a full-time job paying for all my own stuff. Yeah. Now I'm going to also prove that I can do the schooling part. I'm going to let's see if I can add some professional finesse to this.
Yeah.
But back to where you were starting this. What was feeding into that idea, do you think, that so they weren't dissuading you from art necessarily, they were just promoting a different thing. It was like the art thing's cool, but
yeah, you need a degree.
So what do you think was feeding into that?
It's the same thing. It's immigrant mentality. You need the education in order to be successful. You need the degree from a reputable school. So, you know, everyone my age, like we're the same age. So it's everyone our age at that time was like, you have to go to the University of Toronto. You can't go to a college, or you can't go to that university. That's not really a university. So it all had to do with prestige and saving face, per se. It was like I come from a very shame-based culture. So It's all about pride, it's all about shame. And they're the two sides of the same coin. And these are things that I've had to deal with all my life, and only recently have been able to identify and actually start to deal with. So that as a father, I don't portray that against my kids or have that placed upon my kids in a sense. And so, but it's a challenge because this is how I've grown up in this is how I've lived life, my entire life. And you know, in the 4.5 decades and then some, it's just like, oh my gosh, there's so much unraveling that needs to be done. And but yeah, it all had to do with, you had to go to a good school, you had to do well, you had to get your degree in order to get a job. And we're now teaching in an environment where we're telling the kids, no, the degree is not going to get you a job. It's going to get you a very expensive piece of paper.
Yeah.
And it's not life skills. It's not going to get you where you want to be unless you're cream of the crop. But for the vast majority of the students we teach, it's like, you better really think about your, what's the word I'm looking for? Your ability to be flexible, your flexibility, because you're going to have to switch things. Like even in my career, where I come from, like I decided to go into business because my dad was an accountant.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I guess I'll go into accounting because they want me to get a degree in something. That wasn't for me. I very quickly realized this is not my lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then taking a couple of computer courses in school and realizing that I had a natural knack for this, I started to question myself, why didn't I take this in high school so that I would be even further ahead? And then next thing you know, just everything kind of coordinated itself into a field where at the time, it was like, well, where's the future in computers? It was still a question. There might be, but where's the real job? The real jobs were a doctor or a lawyer or something to very established professional environments. and computers was kind of like still, like this is the mid-90s, it's just, we're not too sure where that's going to lead itself to. Then it just exploded. And so it's like I happened to be at the right place at the right time on a number of fronts throughout my life. So computers was exactly where I needed it to be. And I got a job, and it just like, wow, this is amazing. My parents started to see the light. Oh, there's something more to this than just playing games on a machine, right? And so, but yeah, it took a lot to convince them. When I switched over from the computing field to teaching, that was another thing that took quite a bit of time to convince my parents and everybody around me, right? Just it was interesting, but I look back now and it's like, man, oh man, that has been the best decision I've ever made in my life. And it really wasn't a decision; it was a calling, and so it was unique that way. But it's like, wow, there's definitely someone just guiding me and like putting me in the right places at the right time.
I can't tell you how the things that you've introduced, the synchronicity between you and I. So my mom is first generation Canadian and of Polish background. My dad, Irish. His family have been here for a few generations. But I would say definitely the stuff of my ethic comes from my mom's side. I can see it quite clearly. Her family, my family, but her side of the family, both her brothers are contractors, electricians. My grandfather wasn't, her father, John, was an upholsterer, a custodian for the longest time. Actually, he had multi-jobs while...
to support the family.
Support the family. And it's funny, like I would have never, it has never occurred to me ever that I may have an immigrant story to my family that way. No joke, as I'm thinking it, because, and again, it's that, us starting the conversation about you and I standing side by side on like this dial, and the zero divides us, and because one of us is at 1 and the other one's like at 12.
We're so extreme, it's just we're
there's
right
a hair's
next to each
breadth.
other.
But all that circle is a line when you cut it out, right? But you can circle it back around. So for me, it was never about embracing something that was professional, that had a paper designation to it. It really was work as freaking hard as you can for your whole life. Like dog it out. The sort of the labor hands-on trades person. And it's funny because I got soaked in it. And that was part of, my salvo back to my family. Because I fell into that in high school, where high school for me, being in a classroom was very much, it was like my part-time job. And my real life was working restaurants at nighttime and the weekends. And it was never, if there was an event going on, I would not be at school. So it was at a very early age, the work that I felt, like what you were noticing for you, it was naturally pulling me away from school.
Well, it's either going to be life-sustaining or life-sucking, right?
Yeah, but in that as well is that life-sustaining, or let's say life-sucking, within the life-sustaining is also what element of your life is being sustained. And again, yours, let's say it was sort of, you had this drive to follow the creative, the computing, the creative, the making, yet there was the gravity or the tether of stay grounded to something that's going to be able to support you, like you're really going to be paid for that. I was on the other side entirely getting paid, but not pursuing some of the artistic things. Because I was, I'll do this in a different way. So what I felt was sort of pulling me away from school, because I was interested in things that my school wasn't offering. There were 3 teachers, pivotal teachers, that anchored me to a purpose in school. You share first, though. Thinking back, even though, you felt like the gravity was sort of, you're orbiting away, did you have those anchors in the school that sort of kept, because I didn't have a negative sense of school. I just didn't really have a clear purpose for it in my life. Like I actually felt like I could do what I needed to do entirely successfully away from school. But these 3 kept me
tethered.
Kept me tethered. I would say, it was very much, it was the kite string. How about for you?
For me, it was like, I knew how to play school, right? So it was do this, get it done, get graded. And I played that. I can play that well. It was the other aspect of how do I do something outside of school? that became the issue. Mind you, like, as a kid, I look at all the stuff that I've been involved in, I'm thinking, wow, I had a very interesting upbringing. I had a lot of opportunities. My first working job, per se, was a company that I created with a friend of mine at school. We were both 14, and we created a t-shirt printing textile company called Kids Casual Tops, because we learned how to, in art class, do silk screening. And we thought, let's silk screen t-shirts and sell them. And we did, and we started selling them. I was like, this is great. The next summer, we said, let's make it a business. And we looked at what the clientele wanted, and we realized, oh, you know what? People really like touristy stuff, especially if you sell it downtown. So we were part of the canvassing group of people out on the street at Yonge and Dundas, a wall of T-shirts, and we were in there selling. And here we are, 15-year-olds, starting up a company, getting a loan from the bank, and going ahead and really expanding our horizons. And that was really risky for me. But then my parents really and we did really well. And I was at a fork in the road. I can make this a lifestyle. And that's when my parents snapped me back and said, no, you need an education first.
That's where it gets dangerous.
That's where
when you're considering the lifestyle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they come from the environment of my mom is not educated. My dad has high school education because he came here at a young age in the late 60s. And he had to go to high school to learn English. His younger siblings all went through the school system here. He did a year or two in high school. He actually did high school in North Toronto, which was interesting. He was the first Asian there. And he had to go through a lot of stuff. He didn't have the opportunity to go to post-secondary, so he didn't have that option. So a lot was riding on me doing the things that they never did. And so having to live with that and realize at an early age, wow, even though I want to go this route, I know it's going to make money, and they say you got to make money, it was like a paradox of sorts. It was an oxymoronic in a sense of having to, okay, you got to make money, but no, you're not allowed to right now. You need to study so that you can make money. And it's like, oh, okay. So I played school well. I did so well that I didn't know what I wanted to be.
That happens.
Yeah, high school was like, I'm done. It's like, what do I want to do? I have no idea. And back when we were in high school, back in the 80s and early 90s, it was like, you never went to the guidance office unless you were in trouble.
Yeah.
And you never went to the main office unless you were in trouble. So the guidance offices now, or the guidance facilities here in the high school, they touch every single life in the building right now. And I think that's important. But that's something we never had. We were just, finish school, go get a higher education, or go to the workforce. It was either you were, you were either a working class, a blue collar, or you went white collar. Those were only two colors that were out there.
Yeah, not much.
Not
and
many.
if you dropped out, that was your gap year.
Yeah, and basically, yeah, exactly. And so going back to your question, what drove me was just performance, because they drilled it in, my parents drilled it in me, I need to perform. Again, it's all very cultural too. It's very, the immigrant story, and just, you need to perform, you need to, you need to save face, you can't have any shame, and it just really compounded and directed me to do stuff. And by the time I got to university, I was in a program that I didn't want to be in. And like nowadays, I look at it, I look back, it's like, wow, university was a lot cheaper for us when we went, and how expensive it is now. It's like, whoa, my kids, they better know what they want to be in before they go, because if they're just going to try to, dabble and figure out, it's like, no, there's better ways to try to figure out what you're good at or what you want to do without it costing the exorbitant amount it's become. And it's an interesting predicament I find myself in as a dad.
Yeah, no, you got me firing on a lot of different things here. So I'll go back to my three. So my three, the reason that they were able to keep me tethered to school was all because they did things in school that had nothing to do with school.
Yeah.
So my art teacher, Mr. Fitches, was a dressmaker. So we would be in class, and often, his office sorry, podcast listener, I just pointed to the other side of the room right now, but yeah, it doesn't translate well to radio. But at the front of the class, he had a glassed-in office, and he would often have wedding dresses, prom dresses, and I'm dropping the name of what the mannequins are, but those, the bodies that you can sort of have, and he had multiples of those, and he was always working on a dress in class that had nothing to do with school.
Yeah.
Mr. Watson was an ordained celebrant. So he was my history teacher, and he would do weddings on the weekend. And Miss Collins she did poetry, spoken word. So there were all these kind of elements of things that happened away from the classroom that, like, it unfortunately, just reminded me that school, if my teacher is not solely spending time teaching me, but they're living in that space as well, it sort of served to kind of, like, it bumped my brain. I thought, okay, so school, what it made me question is, like, there's something they're not telling me about school. There's something, and I didn't know who they were, but I had a strong suspicion. I said, because I'd be looking at the row-on-row teaching and everything that was about our system, that has changed. Some of it's still the same. Unfortunately, 1985, you're still in our school system. But there were things that I thought, like, someone's not telling me the truth about school here. Because if my teachers can be doing these cool things and be able to share it with me, then, and we're not actually talking about it. Because it always felt slightly forbidden. Like, we shouldn't actually have these kind of cool bits of information. You mentioned that idea of shifting into teaching.
Yeah.
Can you give some shape to that? Elaborate on that. So what was that kind of moment? And then maybe I'll share mine, but it is something that I share with my students now.
Yeah.
And I often frame it, talking to my students now, like, what should I do next?
Yeah.
And the kids look at me like,
what do you mean?
What do you mean? You're teacher. Basically, they're looking at me like, you've arrived and you're crazy. And I'm like, no, I ask you, I love asking that question in careers and learning strategies classes, because it just kind of goes, like, it just opens up the conversation like this.
I remember the first time I saw my teacher outside of school, and I thought, you go outside of school?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And he's like, saw them on an escalator. He's like, that's my teacher. What the heck? Right? So a little bit of history. Out of university, or during university, I got a job at IBM, and I did database development, database work. Out of a university, I got hired by IBM to do e-business stuff with the e-business crew at IBM. Still did more development work, did artistic work as well to some degree, but more on the administrative side, the cognitive side of things, as opposed to the creative side. And worked at IBM for a few years, 5 years in total, and then I realized, you know what, this is not where I want to be. I've always enjoyed teaching, whether it was teaching Sunday school at church, or I had an opportunity to teach adult school at the University of Toronto, School of Continuing Studies. So somebody was teaching a course on internet application development, and they couldn't go that night, and they asked me, hey, Eugene, you available? I go, sure. So I went ahead and I went, oh my gosh, you can get paid for this? I love this. And just, we've all watched the TV dramas or the movies about teachers who made a change, and it's like, oh, you know what? That'd be kind of nice. So I romanticized it. I fantasized about what it would be like as a teacher. And I just didn't give it a thought other than, okay, I've done teaching before. I enjoy being with kids. I enjoy being with adults even more so, and older kids, and really engaging them. And I enjoyed that. And then at one point I decided, I think I better leave IBM. They're too big a company. There's some mobility, but there's no creativity for me. And then an opportunity at Sony Music Canada came about. And so I switched over to there for a couple of years, worked as a developer, moved up to internet application development, and then became an internet application development manager, and did stuff there. That was, people ask, what was it like? I said, it was like a dream, because it was just playtime all the time. You're with artists, you're with musicians, you're with very creative people, and it's a very open environment. There's a lot of things you can do. The only problem was it was very busy. And so as a young married couple looking and desiring to have a family, It's like, no, there wouldn't be an opportunity. Not while I was working and being called to go to Montreal for the weekend, or go to New York for the weekend, or go wherever to this show or that show and help set things up or manage this or that. And it's just, that's when I sat there inside my office with 2 other managers, both of us, all of us in the new media department. And we were thinking, what are we really doing here? And the bread and butter for Sony back at that time was the compact disc.
Yeah.
So, and I said, you know what? We're just CD salespeople. And it's like, and the pun was, we're CD compact disc salespeople. We're trying to make sales, and we were very seedy as well in terms of the tactics that we used to get them. So the pun really stuck with me, and there were some artists that I had to work with, which will remain nameless, that just drove me up the wall. And it's like, I can't believe you punk kids are getting all this recognition and you want all these demands. You have no idea what we're doing and how we're trying to market you. And that's when I decided, you know, I need something else. I need to make a change. I need to do something different. On a philosophical note, one of my blog posts, and I see in your notes here, just the thing about making changes in education with regards to the metaphor of water, right? And how water changes things. A running water, moving water makes change, and that really stuck with me. And at that time, I decided, you know what, I'm going to pray about this. I got my wife to pray about it, and I heard pretty clearly, go into teaching. And it's like, really? And I had to question it. It's like, even though I asked and I got an answer,
We need to
like,
talk about. Can we just talk about this for a second?
yeah, it's like, really? And so then I said, okay, well, God, if this is really you, I need you to prove it to me.
Evidence.
And
you throw down evidence.
Yeah.
man.
Oh, and you know what? For me,
That's awesome.
so over the span of the next 6 weeks, 5 different people came up to me, out of the blue, whether it was at church or in the middle of the week, and said, Eugene, I don't know why, but you're on my mind, and you know, or I was praying for you, or something, and it's like something about taking a step in faith, making a change, and it's like, okay, I get the message now.
Nice.
And it kept on coming, and it's like, okay. So then I decided, I'm going to switch careers and move over to teaching. Told my parents, told my wife, and she was like, okay, that makes sense. If that's what we're called to do, then we'll do that. And so it's like, she was all on board. I said, you know, it's going to be a change in pay. Like, for a year, I'm not going to make anything. And so she's like, yeah, but if that's what we're supposed to do, let's do it. Like, why question it? If that's where your heart is and that's where we're supposed to be, then I think maybe that's where we're supposed to be.
Right.
So with her blessing and her support, it was like, okay, here I am handing my resignation. My boss, the director, looked at me and said, is it about the money? And I said, no, because I'm going to school for a year and it's going to cost me about 10 grand.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be without employment for a year. And then when I get a job, if I get a job, starting salary is 1/3 of what I'm making now. And he looked at me and said, so it's not about the money. I said, no, it's not about the money. It's about the opportunity, experience, and just, this is a place where I feel like I can make or instigate some type of change.
Yeah.
Shifting of sands or whatnot. And try to do something more for society. He said, okay. I took my resignation letter, brought it to the president of Sony Music Canada, and then she called me into her office and said, so is it about the money?
Is it about the money? Yeah.
What's
What's your number? What's your number?
What's your number? And it's like, give me a value. And I said, no, it's not about the money. She's like, that doesn't make any sense. I go, no, it doesn't. But I feel like it's the right place to be.
That is the thing about those decisions.
Yeah. And then my parents said the same thing. Are you going to make more as a teacher? I said, no, I'm never going to make the amount of money that I make now, ever.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, then why are you doing it? And I was like, because it's a calling. And they questioned it for years. For years, they questioned it. But then a couple of years later, after I got into teaching, the beautiful thing was there was a need for computer teachers at that time. It was early 2000s, 2001, 2002. There was a huge need for computer teachers. There weren't enough. And so I got a job right away. They bumped me up on the pay scale, which really helped out immensely. I still had a part-time job at Sony. They had me on retainer.
Yeah.
Everything just worked out really nicely. And then the bubble burst. the internet bubble burst, early 2000s, and everyone in my department got axed. And it's like, wow, that would have been me. And they all looked at me. Everyone in my department looked at me and said, how did you know to move out? How did you know to get out of this and into something more secure? Because every single one of them are like working here and there, contract work back and forth, and they're scrounging, they're struggling, or they're constantly on the search. And it's like, wow, that's a different stressful lifestyle that I really don't like. And I said, I didn't, but to be honest, I believe that some power did and told me, go this way, and I just happened to be willing to follow. And so here I am now. Now, teaching has had its ups and downs, and at the same time, has more ups and downs. I've had a lot of fun teaching, but it got to a point where it's like, okay, so here I am trying to make change, and this is where the other part, the Teach Assist part, the software that I created. I immediately started teaching, and they gave me this piece of software to do my mark assessments on. I said, are you kidding me? And I looked at it, and it's like, this is made from 10-year-old technology. I don't like it. I've developed websites. I developed web applications. And so I thought, maybe I'll just make my own. Especially with regards to how curriculum was viewed, how assessments were to be tallied and stored, and how, a number of assessments weren't even being recognized. It was like learning skills and work habits. Teacher talk here. More often than not, teachers do it twice a semester at midterm and final, and then that's it. There's no data to corroborate the value that they put onto a report card. And so I came up with tools, and I realized these are tools that I think I need to help me and to support my valuation of a student, my judgment of a student. And so I started to create things, and that's when I realized, oh, this is the type of change that I need to also implement as well. And so from that, Teach Assist was born. It wasn't called Teach Assist right away, but over the years it started to gradually grow and evolve and mature to where it is now. And there's still questions about where we're going to go with it as a company, but even more recently I've been doing a lot of soul searching, figuring out where am I. The metaphor, the simile that I had was, rocks are the students in our lives, and we as teachers need to be the one that melts cold curriculum that comes in ice packs and melt it down to a water so it envelopes the rocks, and then stir it around and move it so that it shapes the rocks. And that's the metaphor I've used going into Teachers College, and the one I live by in the classroom every day. I need to be able to melt down this concept to a point that engulfs the students so that they're engaged on whatever side they're at, whether they're at the top of the stack or at the bottom of the stack, and really reach down to them and help shape them in the curriculum that I'm using, but more for life skills. Life skills are the thing. That's the more important part. More recently, I've been getting a lot of imagery about boats on dry land. And it's like, no, boats need to be on water, right? So we need to have water in order for boats to float. Without it, it's just garbage, it's junk. And I realized, no, I'm stuck. I find myself in a place where I feel like I'm stuck on dry land, but I need the water to come. And it's not just stagnant water. The picture of a wave comes to mind. And so, sorry for being so
no, that's all
pictorial,
good.
right?
No, I love that you're throwing that down. Most times I'm sort of wandering through these mental images
And so a picture of a wave comes by, and a wave is not something that stands stationary. It's something that moves, and it's in constant motion. It's whether the crest of the wave or underneath it, there's movement. And so the idea is that I'm designed, and I realize that's a metaphor of who I am, imagery of who I am. I'm designed to be moving, and I've been stuck right now. The last couple of years, I feel like I've been stuck, mainly because I had an accident and I'm still recovering from it. But I feel like I've been stuck, and it's like, no, that's not who I am. And I'm almost identifying with being stuck and stagnant. And I realized, no, I need to move. I need to make that change.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
And it's so, I had mentioned in our on-ramp that, you, without knowing, I didn't even know that you were a teacher on our board when Teach Assist came online, right? When it came to us. I knew of you. I had heard your name, and it was sort of always the redirect. Like if something's not working, just email Eugene. Like and I'm sure to this day you're probably still getting quite a few of those.
Still do.
So you being sort of one of the first individuals that I had heard of within close proximity that was sort of doing what my teachers were doing. Like you, I'm making these connections now as I'm sitting with you. You were doing what Mr. Fitch's, Mr. Watson, and Miss Collins were doing, is that you had sort of like a side hustle that was, I don't know if it was the thing that was floating your EDU boat, or it was the boat and something else was feeding it, right? So, but you were that person in my galaxy. So my question to you, my galaxy, because you were somewhere out there, right? I knew it, like, right? It's like you were out there somewhere. Is Teach Assist still? Are you still there in Teach Assist?
Absolutely.
You're still in there?
I'm still in there, whether it's being called Teach Assist or not.
Yeah.
We had a lot of. I had to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the name of the company or the application would be.
Right.
And it came down to, what do I like to do? I like to assist those who teach.
Makes
sense, right? So I'll call it Teach Assist, right? And the domain for .ca was available, .com was taken, and it's like, do I bite the bullet and buy it? Because it's just cyber squatted on, right? It's just not doing anything. And it's just, it was one of those things where I felt like, no, you know what, I need to do something, and I came up with this. Now, do I still like to assist teachers? Absolutely, in one way or another. There's so many evolutions of it, so many different modules that have kind of expanded from it. But the heart of it is, it's about assisting people, and it's about helping them. And that's where the crux or the etymology of who I am as a teacher and the rationale as to why I am a teacher is because I like to help. I like to help people.
So I'm going to tie together two things here, because I do want to talk about amigurumi. Amigurumi.
Yes.
I almost got the emphasis right.
But on the syllable.
On the syllable. I love this. His teacher humor, right? Okay, so here's something that I pulled out of sort of reading about you in your words, looking at your experience with crocheting, seeing words like convergence and transformation, right? You're taking these elemental or foundational ideas and kind of, knitting them together. So, but what was interesting is because there's in my little sketch here, I have Sackboy. So it's like this, I had this concept emerging of kind of flat to action. And within that, and you can see my quote there, the power of the chain stitch.
Yeah.
Because that's mentioned, you mentioned it, I've heard it before, I've seen it in sort of crochet and knitting videos and forums. It's like when you figure out that almost meditative, repetitive pattern that you can kind of go on automatic, then you've kind of arrived at step one. Yeah. So, I mean, you can shift back to Teach Assist, or you can move forward into the actual crocheting. But I am curious about when you realized that there was a chain stitch with Teach Assist. When you realized that you kind of hooked something. Yeah. Was there? And again, you've thrown down on Teach Assist, so you can move forward into the actual crocheting. Yeah. What is that? What is the power of that? Because I get it. It's like your groove. It's your zone. But it's something more too, because I like that flat to action or flat to 3 dimensions, which you mentioned. It's sort of taking the concept and seeing it come alive in front of you. So what was the chain stitch in Teach Assist? Or what was it about the chain stitch in your crocheting that you would like to address? You can do either way.
That's deep.
It's good, eh? That's not bad.
I like it. No, I likened it to the fact that life is like a thread.
There we go.
There's a beginning and an end. Right? Somebody I heard mention, you got to live in the dash, because on our tombstone, it has your birth date, dash, your end date. And that dash,
that's good.
The dash is your life. So I've heard that in
That's
many.
good and sad at the same time.
Exactly. It's such a short thing.
It is,
right?
yeah.
But that encompasses your life. I've heard it in many sermons and messages and talks.
That's a good one.
And but it's a line, and that dash represents us. And so we are not an infinite line in this world, in this presence right now. We're not an infinite line. We have a beginning and an end to our yarn. What do we do with it? How do we integrate that? And so one thing I've learned about crochet is it's all just one long yarn, and it's like it's all connected, and you can manipulate it to create something beautiful. Or you could have it just lying there as a bundle of tangled yarn, and that's your representation of who you are and what you can provide. Like you can craft something that can carry an item easier, or you can craft something that can protect another item. And so with crochet, and even with Teach Assist, the chain stitch in a sense was that it's not just a product per se, or it's not just something like an end solution to something. There's a living element to it. There's an organic element to it, that it's to be used for something else, whether it's just as a showpiece or something that can help people. It depends on how you implement it. For me, however, it's not something like, okay, I've done it, I'm going to move on. It's something that I've started it. It's a part of me. So it's about integrating it together. A lot of the works I'm coming up with, or the ideas that are stuck in my head, are like, oh, so if I integrate that with this and this, we can come up with something really cool that we've never seen before, or we've seen, but we haven't been able to teach the kids how to do this yet.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get the kids on board with, let's take robotics, crochet, and programming all on the same and try to do something with it. My youngest, he's really into, he's very artistic. Even at his age, he's artistic. He's willing to dabble in it, and we're being very conscientious of promoting it and encouraging him. He's really into these sculpting stuff in clay. Right now it's polymer clay, stuff that you bake and make harder.
Hardens up, yeah.
And so I've been teaching him some techniques that I've learned over the years. I want to make some new things, and we're just doing all these little things, but he's taking to toothpick and putting like minuscule details on things now. And he's starting to really take notice of these minuscule details. He's been taking his Lego pieces, his Lego figurines, and he's been weathering them. He's like drawing little battle damage.
I've seen some of your posts there.
And it's hilarious. It's like, I did not teach him this, and yet he has Sharpie marker all over his hands, and he's realized he can do some really cool things with it. So the creativity is like, it's starting to percolate, and it's like, okay, this is something I want to celebrate with him and encourage him, and make sure that, you know, it's something that we can work on together. And it's a great father-son thing to do together. I did it with my older son. He's kind of walked away from it a little bit, but at the same time, it's one of those things, we'll see where it goes. Right? But again, that I believe from a philosophical standpoint, that we are this line in this world that we live in right now. We have a beginning and an end, and we need to do something with it. And when we do end, it's left behind. That's what's left behind, is our legacy of what we've provided. And people can take advantage of it or not.
You make me want to have like just an average sized tombstone, but like the dash is like multi-line long.
It goes around
Yeah,
and
it
around
wraps
and around.
around. Yeah, like a cylindrical tombstone that just has like this ground out line all the way around, right? Like almost like what are they called? Like
a thread
a
in the screw,
meditation maze.
Oh, yeah.
Just all the way around. And then so you have the birth date, and then somewhere buried in the grass, like maybe even it's down in the post in the dirt.
Where your coffin
Yeah,
is,
they're
where
like,
your bones are.
when did this dude die? That is awesome. You also made me think about that power of, because crochet, as I've tried it, it's making order from disorder.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's where I'm hung. Like I have a hard time sort of pushing myself into that creative end. You ran the session here at the school. I end up making something that I call a bookmark.
Yeah.
It's also been a bracelet for a little while. I have it at home in a drawer. It's like a pink thread that's it's just a bunch of knots, but it's a weird, like I've made
Organized knots.
Yeah, organized knots. I've created something. I've created order. So do we have any time? Were we good? Tell me how much time do we got?
Another 15 minutes.
Another 15.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm still digging that live in the dash. So one of your blog posts, I'm going to wrap you sort of kind of coming around here, but one of the blog posts that you touched on observing teachers kind of working in a mode, and I'm paraphrasing here, but working in a mode of sort of grand assumption that because someone had spent a long time in school, that the equal sign then is, well, now I can teach. Now, that's oversimplified because no one arrives inside of an Ontario classroom as a teacher unless they also sort of are kind of taught how to teach to a degree.
Yeah.
But I'd like to explore a little bit that distance, what you were noticing in that space, because, so when did you come into teaching?
2001 is when I went to Teachers College. So that's
Okay.
and then 2002 is my first year.
So I came in 2005, and similarly, again, this is our parallel story. I'm coming out of industry.
Second career, yeah.
Yeah, second career, absolutely. So I was a chef formerly, so I'm coming out of hospitality. Even to the point, like when I told my bosses,
Yeah.
and the look on their face, because they thought I was calling a meeting to invest in their restaurant, or to go into they were going to open up another concept down in Florida,
Yeah.
or they thought I was going to come and say that I was going to open up my own place.
I'm
And
quitting
like,
it.
no, I'm
being your competitor.
Yeah, I'm going to quit. And they're like, and then they started to make it about the money, and it wasn't. And I remember my mom asking me, about how much I'm going to make the money. And I can remember saying to my students that it was about a $20K difference. It was my $20K decision. They're like, why would you ever do that? And I didn't have the same sort of, let's say, spiritual text messaging that you had going on there. Like that sort of, I didn't have necessarily like that kind of awakening communication, but I had a real sort of,
You got a calling still.
there was a calling. I didn't know, because the conversation for me was around, again, I'm married in 2002, so 3 years in. Conversation was very much like, our life is great, we're doing great, but I don't think, and this is a conversation between my wife and I, we're not going to move ahead with sort of like necessarily children, bigger family, because I was spending so much time,
At work.
probably about 95% of my time running the restaurant.
Yeah.
We had asymmetrical days off, so like,
You never see each other.
they didn't see each other, right? So there was a real cost to us building our professional life. And it came down to, it was a value. It was a value judgment and a sort of like a future looking, as opposed to what have I achieved? What is it I want to achieve? And what I started to realize is that there was family in my future.
Yeah.
So when I arrived, long story, trying to make it even shorter, when I made the decision to shift out, there was a whole lot of people saying, well, what about the money? Why would you do that? Like you're on a upward curve, which began my conversation with myself and others saying that that's when you need to affect change. You need to do it when you're slingshotting over, not when you're swinging under, right? And I likened it to the decision as you go over and you swing under. Once you're launched from an underside, you've got no control.
Yeah.
But you tend to be able to see where you're going if you launch over the top of your sort of like arc. And it just, again, my philosophy of career. So when I changed, I arrived here, I went through Teachers College so fast. It was the one-year program, U of T. And I was in with other colleagues. It was all through tech. So like I was in with hairdressers, other chefs, electricians. And I sort of arrived in a classroom, got a job right away teaching. And I arrived here and still had restaurant mindset. And I was imagining
Business
you still had
mindset.
industry mindset, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So I arrive, and in your words, you're observing in that transition, arriving in education, that there was a certain, I don't know, and I could be jumping, like there was something missing, something added, but there was something in the mindset of the teachers, that the system that you're observing that was not, as you thought, was not maximized, optimized, not as interesting as it could be.
Yeah.
Give some shape to that. So what is it that you were kind of observing that you thought, I'm going to mess with this. That's what I'm going to put in. I'm going to mess with this, right?
Mess with this. And
me, I'm going to take apart this radio.
Exactly, and that's the tinkerer side in me, the disturber of the peace type of thing. And so I did bring in a lot of industry type of lingo or attitude, and the principals back then also noticed you're a little different, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? That's just my industry background, and also I have a different purpose as to why I'm here. It's not just a job. And unfortunately, I'm being critical here, but I saw some teachers where it was just a job for 10 months of the year, and they get the 2 months off in the summer. And then they begrudgingly come back in September and complain for the next 10 months. And I didn't want to view teaching as that. I didn't view teaching as that, because I viewed it as, this is a great opportunity to help shape the minds of the future and be impacting. I had some difficult students, that's always been the case, and I've had difficult days and some difficulties in trying to engage kids. When I have such a passion and they don't reflect it, it's like, what is wrong? And I've had those dilemmas per se. But at the same time, like I did see, it's like, okay, not every teacher here is here for a reason or with the same attitude and mindset that I had. And I quickly realized, okay, I can't make them enemies of mine, but I can't also become like them either. One of the things that a number of people and I have talked about is a lot of teachers really need to live outside of school for a while and see what the real world is like and find out that the real world has changed or the real world is very different from school. Too often I've talked to, and there are great teachers, but there's a few that are just like, you know what, you've been in school for your entire life. You never left high school. You still have the high school mentality of I need to be popular and I need to portray this imagery and I need to showcase my power here. And it's like, okay, coming from a perspective of being a nerd in high school, being the underdog and the neglected one, it's like, wow, it becomes quite evident. But at the same time, it's like, okay, you have your traits, you have your pros and cons, you have your strengths and weaknesses. What are you doing with them? And that's the question that I've always had is, what are you doing with your strengths and your weaknesses? One thing I've learned from OISE, when I went to OISE as well, was Michael Tudor's course on classroom management. It was the eye opener for me, and it was the one course that's like, okay, this is worth all the money in the world. And just to see how a teacher, and this I also learned this at IBM as well, from a lot of presentation workshops that I went to. When you're up in front of the students, you have to be the master of your domain in a sense and be able to convey an engaging environment, no matter what state of mind you're in, no matter what your strengths or weaknesses are. And I learned that through Michael Tudor's class. I learned that through presentation skills and in various work environments about how to recognize my weaknesses and overcome them. My weakness is public speaking. Growing up, I hated public speaking. I hated speaking in front of the classroom. And yet people look at me and say, what are you talking about? I've spoken in front of hundreds of people. I've done presentations to hundreds of people. I've redone a number of presentations. My speech fluency and my stage presence I've worked on, but because I knew these were my weaknesses, people don't see them as a weakness. And so when I don't see that type of passion in a teacher who's not willing to embrace their weaknesses and just say, oh, that's a weakness, so I'm not even gonna do it, it just kind of irks me the wrong way. And so I just wish everybody had that. And that's what I teach with the kids too. And like, I recognize their weaknesses and I say, okay, so what are you gonna do about it? How are we gonna overcome this? It's not gonna be a quick fix in the next 5 months I have you, but I recognize it. I'm calling you out on it. I want you to be able to recognize it too. And so as a teacher, I feel like that's one of the life skills that we really need to call out on.
Yeah, and you also put me back into I had one of the people that talked to me on this podcast. Her name is Jen Apgar. She's out of Waterloo. No, Guelph, sorry. And so I, a couple things that were curious to me. She's like, yeah, let's talk. And right away she flipped and she's like, why do you do the podcast? And we ended up doing we had to do 2 parts because we ended up talking about why
you're doing
Clough,
it.
like what is your driver? Like what's your going on here with you wanting to do this? And she wasn't asking it as a way to sort of shake my tree.
Yeah.
She was, and to use your imagery, she was looking like what are the roots of this?
Yeah.
And if what are the roots of this, and how is the fruit, the sort of like the outcome, which is the podcast? And I said, for me, what it really came down to was trying to get a better peek at what was going on in education in jurisdictions that I have no connection to.
Yeah.
So going wider than what's happening in my staff meeting, in my sort of department meeting, in my board. And I've been really fortunate that I've been able to sort of like jump way out there to kind of soak in other people's context. But it's in step with what you're saying, is that one of the things in industry for me is that it was always what kept me back to my Polish side, working like a dog. I work like a dog, right? It was, I put in the hours,
Yeah.
I put in the suffering.
Yeah.
You know, I bled, I sweat, I learned, I had to work. I would openly say, you want my job, I'll train you for it, but I'm gone, like, you're gonna have to run with me, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But the other side to it is that I always looked outside of industry to keep me inspired in my industry.
Yep.
So there's something to that where there isn't really these really cool conversations, I think, in education about how do you sort of like, how do you synergize that? How do you bring in that stuff
Yeah.
so that you're not playing to your strengths all the time? You're playing to your curiosities. You're playing to your playfulness. You're playing to sort of like your inquiring side.
Exactly.
So I see where you're coming from on that, for
Yeah.
sure.
No. And the latest imagery I've been getting about the wave and everything, and how a stagnant water is stagnant water. It doesn't do anything. You got to stir it. And that's, you know, I'm not the wave. I'm not the water, but I'm the one that's stirring it. And that's me. And I mean, we introduce challenges to the kids, but our hope is that the challenge is like a grain of sand inside of an oyster. Right?
Yeah.
It comes in, it's difficult at times, but over time it turns into a beautiful gem, a pearl, and something that is highly prized and something that can be celebrated. And so that helps me refocus my perspective. It ensures that I'm in the right direction, that I'm moving in the right direction. You know, we have milestones in our life for a reason. It's not just to go back and look at it. It's to turn around and see what direction we're supposed to be moving towards. And
Paying
so,
attention to the dash.
yeah, and pay attention to the dash and the direct. There's an absolute direction as to where you're supposed to be. I've been stuck at forks in the road for too long in my life
Yep.
to realize it really doesn't matter which side I go on as long as I'm moving.
Yeah.
And that's where I am now. It's like I've been stuck at this fork, a physical fork, and it's like, no, I'm gonna start moving, because you know what? I've been too stagnant for too long, and I need to instigate that movement forward.
Okay, here's the last one then. We're gonna come in just under the time.
Yep.
We're good. So, I love to get out of the abstract for a second. I feel like we can have a part 2, part 3 to this conversation. So one of the original things that I was exploring with this podcast is how people deal with change,
Yep.
either planned or unplanned. And, you know, how do you come out of that? And I've had as many people being wagged versus, you know, wagging, so to speak. So I think a good step to sort of talk about change is some sort of a public declaration. So I'm putting you on blast just for a second.
Okay.
So possibly coming down the pipe, what do you see as a sort of like an interesting possibility for the next for you? What space, what idea, what do you sort of looking to inhabit or sort of like get to know, get cozy up beside?
Yeah.
What do you get any sort of like pre-release notes on this? What are you working on?
You're being privy to thoughts that are just honestly fresh in my mind.
I'm good with those.
My wife doesn't even know about these yet.
I can wait to release this podcast until after the weekend if you want.
No, she knows the gestation of the things that are going in my head. She knows what direction we're moving in. Full-time teaching is not my future.
Okay.
There's things that are happening around me, and realizing things are changing, and because things are changing, I need to change with it. And the realization that even though I enjoy teaching, I love teaching, it's not the teaching that is bringing about the change. It's me. I'm the change. I'm the agent of change.
Okay.
So as a change agent, I need to do something about that. So whether it's, you know, for me, I'm honestly a very risk-averse person. I don't like change, though I've been instigating change a lot. It comes at a great cost to me of comfort, and it's like, okay, but I'm at that point where, no, I'm becoming more comfortable with needing to make that change, and so changes around. How I'm responding to it is embrace, because that's what you have to do. And sometimes that embracing of the change comes at a cost, whether it's financial, intellectual, emotional, psychological. It's recognizing it. I think that's the big thing. When it's an unknown, it's fear. There's a lot of fear in it. But if I can label it or put something to it, then all of a sudden it's something I can hold on to and take hold the reins in a sense. And so that's what I'm leaning towards at this point. There's a number of steps that we're going to have to take, whether it's a change in number of hours I work as a teacher.
Yep.
My wife, she wrote a book a year ago, and we've published it, and we're in the midst
Invisibles?
of The Invisibles.
The Invisibles, yep.
We're in the midst of we've just finished a rewrite of it, the re-edit, and we're going through the paces of pushing that forward, and that's what she wants to do full time. So she's like, we're both at that. It's funny. It's like a midlife crisis type of scenario. It's like, okay, what are we doing, right? And
That's good.
We've been hitting it for years, and we're finally just, you know what? We're gonna just bite the bullet and move forward.
I wish we had time for a beer after this. Exact same conversations. No joke.
Yeah.
No joke. I just said to my wife the other day, you know, I feel like we kind of need to have a conversation about who we are as a family. I feel like stuff is kind of like changing
It's
towards the
percolating.
pot.
Yeah, it's
There's
percolating.
something happening.
Yeah,
and the other thing
absolutely.
that you said, because you mentioned growth mindset somewhere, is that one of the conversations that doesn't happen often, but I feel like we're kind of on the edge of this, is that with growth mindset also comes heart palpitations, anxiety, sleepless nights. Like that's the energy, because that's where the energy goes. When you get into growth mindset and you're just like, I'm going to include it, one big salad, that's where at night it kind of wakes you up and you're like, I'm in this mode and I can't turn it down.
Absolutely.
Man, yeah, we're definitely gonna have to do a part 2.
Okay.
Okay, so for now, if people reaching out to you, connecting with you, where can people find you?
Our website's echun.com.
Okay.
My Instagram and Twitter handle are at echun.com, or ECHUNDOTCOM. I spelled it all out
Yeah.
because it's easier.
I'll make it clickable in the notes.
And make
too,
it clickable, yeah. And that's the main way to reach us. From echun.com, you'll get links to all the other things, the blogs, the Teach Assist, the crochet, the ed tech stuff that I've been involved in. So that's our hub right now, and we're open sharing that.
So cool, man. Thanks for talking with me.
No, thank you. The time flew by. It's just scary how fast the time flies by.
I think
So,
we're on point 2. You'll
Yes.
get out of here. We'll go do our pickups. And
Exactly.
we got to go into dad mode.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thanks, man.
Thanks.